to do another brief test, and this is to see how your memory works during a period of learning.
Welcome to the
I'm
VO2
going to
Lounge,
read
using
a list of
AI to
words,
build
and I
more
want you to
muscle.
try to remember them.
The other day, in one of those water cooler chats in the office, someone mentioned trying to make a training plan in the gym, but didn't know where to start. This person in particular is a cyclist, so a trainer road or Zwift equivalent for the gym would be nice, but they don't particularly want to rely on a training plan that is associated with some kind of monthly subscription service. For reference, if you don't know what Trainer Road or Zwift are, they're essentially digital online subscription services that one either offer a virtual world to cycle in, or they offer as well on top of that a training plan that's given to you on a monthly or daily and weekly basis that you can build towards certain goals. Now, this is where we spoke about AI and ChatGPT in particular, and whether or not they could provide some sort of programming for him to improve in the gym. Since then, I've gone away and had a play with it myself to see how good ChatGPT really is at making a training plan for someone. Now, for me, I end up going into the minutiae a bit too much, and when you're describing it to someone, you're like, but this and that, and maybe they ask a question like, what's the optimal number of sets or reps, and you're like, well, it depends, and you get lost in this cycle, and it can be very off-putting for an individual. So coming at it from almost as novice a perspective as I can, how good a training plan can we come up with using ChatGPT rather than Google, for example, or YouTube? Because I think YouTube and Google are almost so saturated with information now that you don't know where to turn until you're years down the line of researching these things and have at least a foundation of this seems legitimate, this doesn't seem particularly credible. So, whereas ChatGPT really, it just provides you with almost a singular source, but obviously from multiple sources. So let's get started, and a bit of a guide as to how I'm using this to gain this training plan in the end. So I think the best place to start is, what is the training split going to be? Think to yourself, how am I going to go into the gym? What am I going to do on a given day? So I asked ChatGPT, what are the most common gym splits? Now it came back to me with, for example, full body split, frequency being 2 to 3 days a week. Structure is each workout targets all major muscle groups in a single session. Who's it for? Beginners, people with limited time, or those looking to build overall strength. Pros, it's efficient use of time, promotes balanced muscle development. The cons, limited volume per muscle group per session. Now, the limited volume, I suppose if you're doing upper and lower body in a single day, you're likely to have an incredibly draining movement combined into a single session to some extent. But I suppose the volume, really, you could do a full body. I suppose that's where it's coming at. The full body, you say you hit legs and you do two sets on legs in a session plus 3 or 4 upper body movements. Then when you come into the next day, you've got DOMs, and so it's quite hard to then do legs again. Whereas if you had one leg session, the delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMs, is now not relevant towards the muscle group you're going to be targeting. Then you've got an upper lower split. It's saying frequency 4 days per week, for example, upper body on Monday, Thursday, lower body on Tuesday and Friday. Now, the structure divides training between upper body, chest, back, shoulders and arms, and lower body, quads, hamstrings, glutes and calves. Who's it for? The intermediate lifter looking to balance training volume and recovery. Pros, good muscle recovery, manageable volume. Cons, can still be time consuming. Then you've got the classic push-pull legs. Frequency 3 to 6 days per week. Structure, push day, chest, shoulder, triceps. Pull day, back and biceps. Leg day, quads, hamstrings, glutes, calves, etc. Now, who is this for? Intermediate to advanced lifters. That I would agree with, and to some extent. However, even if you're new, I think it can be a good way of you just keep these sessions quite small, but you have a dedicated sort of movement pattern that you're trying to achieve on any given day. Then you've got the bro split, which is body part split. Really, I think, as it says, really kind of more for advanced lifters who are really trying to isolate these individual muscle groups heavily, to do with, like bodybuilding, where you're really trying to accentuate a maybe lacking muscle. The push-pull split, upper-lower split, full body part combination, specialized splits, for example, strength and hypertrophy. All those aren't splits, they're training focuses. I wouldn't class them as a split, but it definitely gives you a range of splits, and essentially pick what is most agreeable with your current situation, what you're trying to achieve. So yes, you've got to come into it with some a bit of an understanding that there are splits, but you're probably in the process of trying to figure out this training, you will have come to the conclusion that, okay, I need some kind of routine or split, as they are called. So now I had a training split, which I've gone for in this case is push-pull legs. It's now time to identify on ChatGPT what your routine's going to be. So I've typed in, make me a gym routine that is 3 days a week that follows push-pull legs, and the days that I am intending to train are Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Obviously these days can be fluid, but it gives it something to work with. But you don't want to overload it, is what I found. If you give it too much information about the training you're going to be doing, it just has a habit of missing things or sort of glancing over it, like it just puts it as a line item, like just one item in there, rather than fully developing that specific component that you're trying to emphasize. Now, the Tuesday is put as a push day. It's put barbell bench press, where you're doing 4 sets, 6 to 8 reps, 90 seconds rest, and the tip is to keep your shoulder blades retracted for stability, which is a valid tip. But for a newcomer to training, or who's done a little bit, it can be quite hard to translate this written advice into practice. So I'd say the best thing to do here is combine, because some of these movements may be new to you, combine ChatGPT with, for example, YouTube, where you can look up the specific movements it's stating to see what they are, what machine you need, and any key movement techniques and tips to achieve optimal muscle engagement. And then next, it talks about the incline dumbbell press, which I'm actually quite pleased with that it's got it in there. There's research going in that suggests that flat bench press will target the lower and mid portion of the chest the same amount as an incline dumbbell press or bench press. However, the incline press targets the upper portion of the chest more than the barbell bench, like a flat bench press. And so utilizing an incline press, especially if you're short for time, is more time effective than using a flat setup. However, there is an element that if you've got the time to do both, you're likely to lift a larger mass, and therefore maybe that signals to the muscle to grow slightly more, and maybe you hit it slightly different. But using both is going to be very valid, and that's 3 sets. It suggests 8 to 10 reps. Rest is 60 seconds. Now, overhead shoulder press, again 4 sets, 8 to 10 reps, 60 to 90 seconds of rest. I'd say err on the higher side of the rest for all of them. Just do 90 seconds, or if you know you're someone who dilly-dallies a little bit more, maybe start getting into the movement after 60 seconds and then give you some time to settle in and start the exercise. Then we've got lateral raises, tricep pushdowns, overhead tricep extensions, then on to the Thursday pull day. For pull, we've got deadlifts. It's suggesting 4 sets at 5 to 6 reps. These, as you'll see, are really on the more strength side of things, which we will touch on shortly. Bent over barbell rows. I mean, you could, in theory, use dumbbells for any of these. Lat pull downs, or pull-ups. Pull-ups being more of a advanced movement compared to a lat pull-down, and especially for a new lifter, if you're on the heavier side, it can be harder given that weight doesn't really scale, and for a smaller individual who's maybe under-muscled rather than overweight, you're going to be finding it easier to do pull-ups faster in a reasonable volume than someone who's maybe a heavier individual. Then you've got seated cable rows, face pulls. That's something that you probably want to look up the movement, because it's a bit, getting the movement correct can be a bit of a challenge to new lifters. Then bicep curls and hammer curls. So here, as you can see, it's got 2 bicep movements, which again, we'll touch on once I've done the Saturday leg day, which is back squat. Here, really, you could substitute it out for a hack squat, for example, or some other kind of machine movement. It suggests 6 to 8 reps. Again, it seems to do the heavy lifting early in the session, which is a good idea. However, it then does leg press afterwards for the higher volume, 3 sets, 10 to 12 reps. Arguably, you could probably have both of these movements in a sort of more hypertrophic window. It then says Romanian deadlifts, leg curls, leg extensions, and calf raises. It also gives some tips at the bottom, which is warm up. Start each session with 5 to 10 minutes of light cardio and dynamic stretches. I really like the fact that it's referenced dynamic stretches rather than like a static movement, if you can call it that, like think of a traditional hamstring stretch versus like, say, leg swings, where you're doing it in a dynamic fashion. There's a lot of work that's gone into the fact that a static, non-dynamic stretch can actually reduce the peak force the muscles are able to produce and reduce your overall performance. Now, stretching adjacent to a like powerful movements, so on maybe your rest day or a training day, but not in and around the actual strength movements, is what you want to be doing to improve flexibility. Now, it also suggests a cool down, end with static stretching and foam rolling. Here, not so sure on this one. I'd say a cool down, really, to be honest, for most people in the gym, you can kind of just roll out of the gym and just naturally cool down. Yes, in a more endurance setting, there is evidence towards the benefits of a cool down, and maybe there are the same for lifting, but really it's just going to extend the session out for most people further than it needs to go. Progressive overload. The key really to all training is suggest increasing weights or reps each week to continue progressing. Arguably, at the beginning, you don't have to worry about it as much, because it's just naturally you're going to be increasing the weights as you go along. But make sure you bear it in mind. It doesn't always have to be weight. It can also be volume in the form of reps. Hydration and nutrition, something people overlook, I think. I suppose with the whole BCAA hype that there was at one point, people do sometimes stay hydrated, but it's easier for endurance athletes to look at this of getting nutrition in during the session, maybe a bit of sugar in the water. That can just help keep the session flowing and make sure you don't fade. Now, with this all sort of out the way, the question may now be, well, how do I know how many sets I should be doing of each muscle group? Maybe this isn't a question that you naturally ask as a new lifter, but it's definitely something you could consider. And you can ask ChatGPT this: what is the optimal number of sets per muscle group for hypertrophy? And interestingly, it does suggest 10 to 20 sets. Beginner lifters being in the 10 to 12, and intermediate to advanced lifters being in the 15 to 20 range. Frequency, it typically recommended to distribute these sets over 2 to 3 sessions per week per muscle group. For example, training the chest for 15 sets could be split into 3 sessions of 5 sets each, or 2 sessions of 7 to 8 sets. Intensity, sets should generally be performed at 6 to 12 rep range with moderate to heavy weights. approximately 60 to 80% of 1 rep max to maximize muscle growth. Now, it goes into more detail of example weekly volume and how to split it across your sessions. And really, it gave me more confidence, because on the Huberman Lab, when Huberman has Dr. Andy Gulpin on the podcast, he references the importance of trying to achieve a 10 set volume per muscle group. So clearly ChatGPT is well informed and is giving valid information here. So from there, I would suggest doing these kind of questions in a separate tab to the main string of building the workout plan, because it seems to heavily reference stuff you've already said to it. Even if you're trying to go off track and then come back, it does almost keep a memory of what's happened. So keep that in a separate tab, your random miscellaneous questions. And then once you've got an idea, so here you've got an idea of, I'm going to target 10 sets per muscle group, we can then go into asking it that. So back on your main tab, I then ask, rewrite this and make sure each muscle group has 10 sets. Now what we'll find here is at the end, conveniently, it's now, so it's summarized everything that we've done already, but now given a breakdown of the sets per muscle group and tried to get them close to 10. It hasn't quite. It's done 7 sets of chest, 7 sets of shoulders, 6 sets of triceps, 10 sets of back, 6 sets of biceps, 10 sets of quads and glutes. It really puts quads and glutes together. However, it hasn't actually hit. It depends how you're referencing glutes. If you're considering your back squat and your leg press, maybe to do with your foot positioning, then arguably yes, you, with Romanian deadlifts in there as well, you've actually hit the glutes 10 times, but it does heavily depend on where your foot positioning is. So you could argue glutes are slightly down there, but the posterior chain in general between the hamstrings and the glutes and the calves are getting 10 sets. Obviously, that's a wide muscle group, and ideally you'd hit each one of those with 10 sets. Calves being the smaller muscle that they are, 4 sets is probably adequate. Biceps, you could at 6. It depends what you're trying to achieve here, but definitely the fact that the large movers of the quadriceps, the upper chest kind of area, all of those are getting adequate volume here, after recommending that it rewrites it with 10 sets per muscle group. Now, here, when we look at it, we notice that back squats, it's saying 6 to 8 reps. Deadlifts, it's saying 5 to 6 reps. Barbell bench press, it's saying 6 to 8 reps. And then there's a more hypertrophic movement, which is the incline dumbbell press, which is suggesting 8 to 10, for example. And then the leg press, which is again 10 to 12. So we want this session to either be more hypertrophic or more strength orientated. So let's say, for example, which most people are trying to achieve a physique. There is an element of health, but a lot of people are going to the gym because of a body image situation. If you're doing it for a sport, then maybe the hypertrophy is still important for the raw mass gain, and then there'll be a strength component maybe as you approach your goal event or the beginning of like a season if you're playing rugby, for example. But let's assume you're trying to do hypertrophy. So here you can say, and this is key here, I could have clumped all of these questions into one line. And what I found was when you try build out the perfect question in one go, ChatGPT kind of it glosses over some bits sometimes, and almost in its head, in its AI mind, it's trying to make sure it incorporates all of them. And really, to make sure you get the most out of it, you need to almost break it down step by step for it and let it focus on a very narrow element of what you want. and then build and then build and then build. It's like a Twitter thread almost. Now, so here I then say rewrite this plan to maximize hypertrophy. And you can see the flat barbell bench press is now 8 to 12 reps. The incline dumbbell press is still 10 to 12 reps. The shoulder press is now 8 to 12 reps. When we come to the deadlifts, these are now 8 to 10. It does suggest moderate weight here. Conveniently, it does. It does say deadlifts in brackets, moderate weight. Now, deadlifts is a kind of movement where it probably does need to be more of a strength movement. But arguably, you could make it hypertrophic, and you just need to be more conscious of the movement pattern and that you're not straining yourself. Now, if we're getting a bit off topic and a bit technical to some extent, but a good hypertrophic movement needs to incorporate a large amount of stretch of the muscle. The deadlift itself doesn't allow for that, so you could probably keep this in the smaller rep range and use it primarily as a strength movement. However, don't worry if you're not and you're following this. All of this will come out in the wash. This currently is providing a really good baseline for any individual to start their journey through training. Now that we've got this kind of blueprint, now you've got at the bottom this summary where it's giving you the sets that you're doing of each muscle group. What you'll notice is you've got chest, shoulders, tricep, backs, bicep, quads and glutes, hamstrings and calves. But something's missing, the abdominals. I was going through this a couple of times as I was going through, and I was thinking, this is pretty good, but what's it missing? The abdominal region, so your abs. So I've asked it to add one abdominal focus movement on the push and pull days, because 2 movements a week is probably enough. Now, I'm going to say this now. To me, and through some watching various videos, and then I saw Jeff Nippard's kind of consolidated time-effective approach for training, and he mentioned 2 movements that I've used in the past. I've always found to have really, for me, good ab engagement. You really feel them working, you really get a pump, and they've been referenced in various other places. And the exact movements in the science are that you essentially need a crunch and some kind of leg movement. And ChatGPT delivers. So on the Tuesday, it recommends hanging leg raises, 3 sets, 12 to 15 reps. And the tip is to control the movement to avoid swinging and engaging and ensure you engage the lower abs. So this is where one of those, rather than using like a hanging bar, using the actual machines where you lock your arms in the parallel kind of position, and then your back supported, really allows you to focus on the abs. And then on the Thursday, it suggests cable crunches. So this, I honestly was really impressed with the fact that I've asked it for 2 movements, and it hasn't given me some kind of things like Russian twists or anything of those really incredibly dynamic but not necessarily effective as these 2 movements. That I was really impressed with. So then it's added in there that the abs have got 6 sets over hanging leg raises and cable crunches, which we're doing pretty well here. We really have got a good setup. But what I said earlier was that looking through it, I realized that the glutes, the main thing targeting the glutes, yes, Romanian deadlifts, yes, traditional deadlifts, but really, I personally would prefer to have a more isolatory focused movement on the glutes. So I've asked it to add 1 glute focused movement to the leg day. So we've still got back squats, we've still got leg press, we've still got Romanian deadlifts, we've got glute bridges or hip thrusts. It's now said 3 sets of that, reps 12 to 15, and the tip is really good. Squeeze the glutes at the top and hold for 1 to 2 seconds to maximize the activation of the glutes. I find this movement is a movement that I struggle personally to really activate my glutes. And so I then tried an addition of lunges, and I got unbelievable glute activation, or at least muscle soreness the day after. The following week, I thought maybe it was the lunges were the primary activator, and it turned out it looks like it was just more the activation of different parts of the glute, but also the volume. And when I went back to just doing the one movement, less engagement. When I pair the two, so glute bridges or hip thrusts and lunges, incredible engagement. Now, obviously, you haven't learned this from ChatGPT, but I thought I would just add it in that when you look at these, it is worth thinking that you can also type in alternatives, but it's providing you a great example of what you're trying to do. And if you don't want to do that movement on a given day, or just your gym doesn't have a machine that works well with you, then you can always ask it to substitute something else. Now, we're pretty far down the road. I think that training plan in general that we now have is really good. I think it's really going to, you can make it yourself. I've listed all the movements, but the key is that we now need a deload week. So you can ask ChatGPT, what do I do? How often do I need a deload week? And what does it involve? And now, general recommendations, it suggests every 4 to 8 weeks, most lifters benefit from a deload week. Now, heavy training cycles, 4 to 6 weeks. And if you're just new to the gym, then maybe 4 to 8 weeks. So really, once you start to feel like it's almost a mini plateau within a training block, that's where it's suggesting you do it. So, I've asked it for a deload week. It's given some guidelines of reduce sets by 50%, use 50 to 60% of your usual weight, keep rest periods the same or slightly shorter, and focus on performing, on perfecting your form and control and tempo. It's almost like a learning week where you can try iron out any bad habits. Maybe because you've reduced the weight, you suddenly realize, oh, my deadlift, I've really been doing this poorly, or my bench press, I haven't really been getting particularly deep, because now that I've got a lighter weight and I can get the full range of motion, I now see the benefits. So essentially, flat barbell bench press is gone down to 2 sets, incline dumbbell press 2 sets, seated dumbbell shoulder press 2 sets. Everything's basically been limited in the Tuesday session to 2 sets. The Thursday, again, it's just flattened it to 2 sets on everything. And then Saturday, again, 2 sets on everything, and reduce the volume that way. So the tips for the deload week is to focus on slow, controlled movements, to reinforce good form, prioritize rest and recovery outside the gym, for example, sleep and nutrition. This should be at the forefront. That's the only thing here. I would say this shouldn't be a tip for the deload week. This should just be a tip for every week. Rest, recovery, sleep, nutrition. Keep those on points at all times, and it will benefit you no end. Use this week to refresh your mind and body for the next training phase, but I think more importantly, use it as an opportunity to iron out those bad habits and prevent yourself from developing further ones. And maybe you could even, if you come out of a deload week and you're like, whoa, my chest has never felt like that after a session, and it was actually less volume, then clearly range of motion definitely needs some work, for example. Or squats the same. Maybe you get much lower in the squat, much more controlled, and you realize that maybe your 8 sets of 100 kilos should actually be, 8 reps of 100 kilos should actually be 8 reps of like 80 kilos or 85 kilos after doing your like 60 kilo deload session. So worthwhile doing. Definitely don't fall into the trap of perpetually trying to improve without a little bit of a rest. Sometimes naturally in our lives we do have deload weeks where we go to the gym once. So you can ask ChatGPT to consolidate this into 2 sort of full body sessions where it doesn't necessarily hit the full 10, or not that it is already, but doesn't hit the 10 sets per body part, but you get the idea. ChatGPT is clearly incredibly useful for experienced and new lifters. I almost think it is more useful for experienced lifters because you can do what I've just done. You know where to guide it. You know the requirements that you're trying to hit, and it just kind of gives you a fresh insight onto how you could be programming your training. So what's your takeaway from all this? Are you going to now go and use ChatGPT to make your training plan for the gym, your programming? I'm attempting to do something a little bit different on this pod at the moment. I'm going to be doing some more of these ad hoc kind of ad-libby, off-the-cuff episodes where they are less rooted in full-blown science and reviewing papers necessarily, although I may do some shorter episodes where I just quickly go through a paper that I've seen and I'm interested in, and then try to take that knowledge from those papers to then do my traditional longer form episodes. But we'll probably be making more and more of these episodes where they're potentially a little bit shorter, although this one's 35 minutes. But tell me what you think. Feel free to share your opinions with me on Instagram, email, or on the VO2 Lounge Discord server. Links will all be down below. For more content like this, explore my previous works. Follow the show if you like it and want to hear more and don't want to miss another episode. 5-star reviews are always welcome. And lastly, I would like to challenge you to share the pod with one of your friends today. It really helps the pod grow. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, it's goodbye.